how do we relate when we have all these trust issues and all of this baggage? Well, we have to unburden. Yeshua tells us, come to me and unburden. You have to unburden. But you also have to know that the other person is burdened. You know, I don't know if I want to say it this way. I almost wish, I'll say it that way, all right? I almost wish that all of these things were actually diagnoses, okay? Because you know what? When you see somebody as wonderful as Rylan, you can see his physical handicap. You know his challenge. And so you have a certain level of compassion because it's an obvious challenge, okay? But when you see someone who looks fairly together, you don't understand that their handicap's not visible, okay? And all of their experiences have handicapped them so that they are not capable of having a healthy relationship without help with their handicap. This is really important that you're getting this, okay? You need to hear this, all right? If you're married, your spouse is handicapped, and you're sitting there going, I always knew that. Well, so did they about you. You know, this really came clear to me when I was counseling a situation with a married couple. They weren't even part of the ministry because I don't know how they found me. One of them, I guess, was sort of connected. And they had already separated. And the husband was wanting to get back together. He didn't know what to do. And in talking to them, and he agreed to counsel with me, even though I was not his rabbi. He really wasn't part of the ministry. But he was willing to do whatever. And I would talk to her, and she says, well, I don't know why he can't do this, and I don't know why he can't tell me he loves. Well, I don't know why he can't. So then I talked to him. I said, well, why don't you do those things? You know what it turned out? He can't. It's a handicap. He doesn't think to do it. It never occurs to him to do it. It's not because he doesn't feel it, whatever it was, but it's a handicap in him. And then I went back to her, and I said, the next time she said that, I said, well, what if that's actually, your words are actually true? She goes, what do you mean? You said, well, I don't understand why he can't. No, because your mind, you're thinking it's a won't. What if it's a can't? She's like, oh, I never thought of it that way. You know, they restored? Because she started dealing with him as a handicapped man who can't do those things naturally without the help and effort of counseling and changing some things because it's a handicap, all right? When we did the colors, you need to understand that every color had strengths, but also negative attributes that can handicap you, okay? Okay, so, and if you're missing a color, you have a handicap on every level. You don't have the good or bad, all right? And I was missing two of them. So if you're dealing with me, you are dealing with a very handicapped person. Don't laugh, this is true. And you have all these expectations, well, blah, blah, blah. Listen, I'm so out of balance on the personality chart, you have to know that that's going to handicap me. I'm 87% one and only 13% of the other and zero of everything else. If that was you, you would expect to be handicapped out of balance. Handicap simply means that you have a balance problem in some area. You are challenged in doing something. And so, they look at people with super high IQs and they're handicapped in a lot of areas of their life, but they're great at that one area, okay? Musicians, you see musicians, they can play music and do all these other things, and then they end up blowing their heads off because they were handicapped in other areas. They could not deal with life, but they could play music. Anything that's high-end, extreme, or above average means something else is less. Okay? All right, I'm going to use an example that some of you are going to like, some of you are going to hate. All right? But I remember when I was a child and we played these role-playing games. And they could be like superhero games or Dungeons and Dragons, whatever it was. And everybody's be like, the rabbi played all that. I was a kid like everybody else. and now I'm the rabbi. So knock it off. But in one of the games we played, it was a superhero one. So it wasn't all of that stuff, but it was like where you can design your own hero, what powers he had. He could fly, he could do this, he could be bulletproof, whatever it was. But with that, there had to be a balance. So you were given so many points to put in different things, which means that if you put them here, that means that you had a deficit somewhere else, a weakness. And if you wanted to go even higher above the normal amount, you could, but then a negative had to be added to your situation. Okay? So like maybe you had a normal person that was now going to be constantly under attack by the bad guys because you took this extra thing to be more powerful here, but now you have to have this balancing weakness. So in other words, no matter how great you would be at something, there was always a balance. And I learned that from this stupid game. That there's trade-offs. If you're going to have a lot here, that means there's less there. That's actually a reality to life. Thing is, you didn't get to put the points in the different places. You were born with what you have. But now you can learn to work as best you can with what you were given to start with and make the most out of where you started. But you didn't have a choice in how you started. So a lot of people say, well, I like the way he teaches, but I don't like the way he talks to me. Well, that's because I'm handicapped. Okay? Now that, by the way, don't ever use your handicap as a justification or excuse. But you still need to know you're dealing with a handicapped person. I need to know that so that I can try to overcome the handicap. All right? Person's born without one hand, they learn how to do things in a different way with the other hand. I've seen people without hands do things with their toes. I couldn't believe I couldn't even do it with my hands. You figure out a way to work around your handicap. Okay? All right? But you have to start thinking about the other person. Every person you're working with is handicapped. They're just not diagnosed necessarily. And if they are, they're not telling you. How are we going to have these relationships the way we need to have them if we're not going to at least accept and love the other person as just as screwed up and broken as you are? Imitate Elohim. Elohim knows how bad and screwed up and messed up we all are, and he loves us all anyway. He started you where you were, knowing that you could get there because you're going to take the time to strengthen the weak parts, get rid of the negative parts as best you can as you transform. Transforming is something we really don't want to talk about. We don't really think about. We just think, oh, we're supposed to become like Yeshua. We're supposed to become like Messiah. Well, what does that mean? That means that you have to make real changes. The parts of you that don't match him have got to change to match him. When you got married, we got a lot of married people in here, you've got to make changes to adjust to the other person, and they've got to make changes to adjust to you. You don't naturally come together agreeing on everything and seeing the world the same. Now, hopefully you see most things the same, and that's why you got married, and that's why you get along most of the time. All right? But the reason we end up in big, horrible fights with our spouses is because of the handicaps. One person's handicap smack dab stepped on the other person's handicap, and it set off an explosion. Usually over something ridiculous. But that's because we're broken and we're handicapped. Okay? And so I want you to start looking at people, not trying to figure out their handicap, but just understand you're dealing with people just like you that have weak areas. All right? And it's easy to figure out the one in the wheelchair. Okay? Or the one who can't see, or the one who can't hear, or there's some sort of physical deformity, because you can see it. Well, boy, that person sure yells a lot. Well, because they're handicapped. Oh, that person's so quiet. I never see it because they have a handicap. Well, that person, because they have a handicap. It's a weak area that's hurting their ability to function in the balance.